You're listening to Art Workers, the Independent Artists Forum. I'm your host, Carl Bindman. Thanks for tuning in. Our guest today is Brennan Urbi, a director here in New York City. In our conversation today, Brennan and I process our respective hang-ups regarding the institution of musical theater. We talk about the actor-to-director pipeline, and we discuss the relationship between exploration, growth, joy, and ego. Also, Brennan asks me more questions than I expected. Over to you, Carl. Thank you for tuning in, everybody, and thank you for introducing me. My guest today is Brennan Urbi, and Brennan M. Urbi. How important is that M?
It's so not important. Columbia accidentally put it on everything ever, so now people who I've met at school think it's important. And also, for a while, on all of my school documents, it was Brennan Urbi.
So I'm joined by Brennan Urbi, a director and a sometimes performer, and sometimes both at the same time when actors get COVID, and a friend of mine. So I'm really excited to have Brennan here. And Brennan, I think this is I'm beginning to question this practice on my third time, but I'm going to turn the floor to you a little bit. And what do you think is important for people to know about you and your journey to being a theater maker?
Oh, wow. What would be important? I started what I perceive as is late. But then I talk to other people in their timelines are much different.
Well, what is that for you?
I was probably like 13 or 14. But I didn't get serious about it until I was like 18. And I think that's important because
what is serious?
Well, that's when I was like, oh, I'm going to study this. When I'm like, I'm going to do this maybe forever. When I made that mental flip. And I think it's another thing that's important is I was a swimmer for 15 years. And it feels important because that was like my like the butterfly effect. That was like my diversion point where it was either I was gonna go to a state school and like swim and become a physical therapist and be sporty Brennan, or the choice that I did make was like, I'm gonna go to theater school and be a theater nerd.
I also have a kind of like, here's this thing I was hyper focused on that I was really planning to do and that I put all my energy into, and then moved away from that.
What was it?
It was aviation.
What?
Yeah. My plan was to be a fighter pilot in the Canadian Air Force.
A fighter pilot?
I was in the Air Cadets, which is like this sort of, how do you describe the Air Cadets to an American? It's like Boy Scouts on steroids, and it's also like a feeding program for the Air Force.
Can you fly a plane?
Yeah, I got 2 pilot's licenses through this.
Carl.
I was an air cadet from 12 to 18. I got 2 pilot's licenses. I got to go to China on like an international exchange.
Did you fly to China?
No. Well, okay. I did, but I didn't
pilot the plane. I understand.
No, we swam. It was speaking of swimming, but like I want to talk more about this maybe later. But like this thing of like, oh, being able to just super commit to something for a really long time. Is a valuable skill, I think, when it comes to navigating theater, because it's also a thing that you need to do for a really long time to be able to do anything in it.
This is a slow burn of a career path. Yes. Or a life path. I think it's a life path. But wait, okay, I have one more pilot question.
Okay, sure.
You got 2 pilot licenses.
Oh, yeah. So one for glider and one for single engine VFR, which is visual flight rules. So like you can only fly during the day and in decent weather.
Amazing.
I can't anymore, to be clear. Very expired.
But like, could you? Like,
the muscle memory is there.
Okay. Like you still feel like you could comfortably fly a plane?
No. If I had to.
Okay, sure.
I could fly a very specific plane. I could fly two very specific planes, a Cessna 152 and a Cessna 172.
Brilliant.
Anything else, I would kill everybody on board, including myself.
And they're tiny, smaller
tiny
planes. How many people? Two?
Well, so for the 152, 2 people. For the 172, 4 people. Oh, I didn't say the name of the podcast. Artworkers, the Independent Artists Forum. You're listening to. Anyway, Brennan, you were 18 when you decided to pursue theater.
Yes. And then, I was like, oh, I'm gonna go to undergrad. I had done like enough community type theater in Iowa, where I grew up, that I was like, okay, I have the skill set for this. I have the love for it, and now I want to be proficient. Like I want to be studied, and I want to be good at it with some like real technique. And then I decided to go to undergrad in Chicago, study acting. Well, I actually studied musical theater. I started in musical theater, and then I quickly was like, not for me. And then I transferred into the acting program.
Because so Brennan just assistant directed The Spring Awakening in Flint, Michigan.
Yeah.
Which is a musical theater piece. So I'm curious what it was about musical theater that turned you off that maybe doesn't exist now for you as a director.
I think, well, musical theater was like all that I knew, because in Iowa, they aren't really producing a lot of plays, especially plays that a teenager can be in. So I just didn't know. I wasn't like taking in any plays.
Like in high school?
I mean, we read Romeo and Juliet. And then I did like You Can't Take It With You. That shrug says it all. It's fine. It's fine. Oh, and then The Pillow Man.
Oh, yes.
Which is lovely. We did The Pillow Man. And honestly, that's when I was sort of like, oh my God, plays are really cool and musicals are fun.
But when it came time to like do the dirty work of actually buckling in and like learning how to do this seriously, what was it about musicals that wasn't attractive for you there?
I think it was, I don't know, there were like 3 musicals that I felt like I could kind of dig my teeth into.
And they were?
Sweeney Todd, Spring Awakening, and then I could make up a third one, but I don't actually have one off the top of my head. But like with actual like characters to like peel apart and figure out, or like actual plot lines that felt exciting to structure an arc around, I was not finding in musical theater at all. And there was a ton of focus on like the technicality of like how to sing and like the dance training, which I use a lot now, but was not the thing about theater that like got me out of bed in the morning.
And what was that?
That did get me out of bed?
Yeah.
One is like juicy stories, which I want to find a better explanation for. Is just like, I don't have the words for it in this moment, but like something, I'm thinking like Sam Shepard is one of the first playwrights that sort of like shook my brain, and he writes plays that I can't put down because, okay, so I think it's like complex people who do messy things, but there is only love
for those people.
From
the perspective of the playwright.
Yes. Like I think Sam Shepard writes just shitty people. He writes horrible, awful people who do horrible, awful things, but he cares for them so deeply.
And horrible, awful things to the people that they care about.
Yes.
Too.
Yes.
Yeah.
In that, okay. And I think that's what I don't find in musical theater is like that tension of I love you and I'm doing like the worst thing ever to you. I find that level of conflict is what pulls me into the theater, is like we can watch and appreciate messy people, messy situations, messy relationships.
Yeah. It strikes me that what you were saying about the idea of technical proficiency and how to sing correctly and all that being really important in like the development of the musical theater performer seems like it would also bleed into the form as a work of art, right? Where it's like the way you practice is the way you do, and like the availabilities of the art form afforded to you become limited by this like need to do it right. And what's my kind of journey has, because I also felt really similarly. Mostly out of ignorance of musical theater. Like my exposure to musical theater was zero as a child. And my exposure to drama began with Shakespeare and sort of evolved from there in high school into like improv and games and stuff. So my approach to making theater has always been oriented around play and like grappling with weird stuff the way a high schooler engaging Shakespeare has to.
Yes.
So I think that's bled into how I just think about the art form. And I see how if somebody was like coming at it, I'm starting my journey with how do I do this right?
Yes.
And you have a whole industry of people like that. And I think what I'm learning now that I'm in New York and know a lot more musical theater artists who are the kind of actor that I think I am, just also in musical theater, where they've been able to shed maybe some of that like stricture of correctness. Something I'm excited about is kind of learning how to listen to and engage with musical theater more generously.
Me too. And I think that ultimately, like, I don't hate the art form because I love dance. I love music. And I think like concerts are my favorite thing in the world. So
do you make music?
Not actively, but like I'll jam with my friends and I play guitar and piano and that sort of stuff. So I feel very like musically inclined. But like you were saying, it's the precision of it all that I find false.
And but there's the thing is when you have somebody who is able to meet that and make it their own, and to find the space for play once they've mastered the technical elements. Because singing is so much fucking harder than talking.
It's so hard. It's so hard. And everyone's like, oh, everyone can sing. And I believe that that's true. But
sure. But can everybody sing and act and move and communicate a story and dance sometimes and hit your mark and listen to your scene partner?
No, it's a really hard art form.
Yeah. Well, we did a sort of musical.
It was.
Kind of.
It was a sneaky musical.
It was. And what I learned, Brennan directed me and some of people that now we both know in a production by Darius M. Buckley.
The M's important there.
The M's important there, called Leo's Requiem, which had a lot of music. This was a play about a composer and sort of his childhood friendship with a young musician. I played their music teacher. I'm not a strong musician, so that was interesting.
You were brilliant.
Oh, thank you.
You were so brilliant.
Thank you. But there were like a couple of songs in the show, and the 3 minutes of each song took maybe as much rehearsal time each as like entire scenes.
Because it just like, it needs the attention, like building, especially you were singing like 3-part harmonies. That takes a lot. That takes a lot of time and effort, especially for someone or for a group of people who are not used to that. It took me like 10 years to figure out how to part sing.
Yeah. Well, so I want to sort of tie this back to your directing practice, because it seems to me that maybe one of the reasons you bounced off of musical theater is because of this super technical proficiency, is this bar that you have to clear and have to put so much effort into clearing to be able to have fun with it.
Yes.
And that's certainly a feeling that I have, where I'm just like, I'm just not even going to audition for a musical because I know how much work I'm going to have to do to just be able to do the work.
Right.
And I am curious, though, how that changes for you as a director of a musical.
I think I find that I can find the love in music more when I don't have to actively perform it, right? Like I came into music because I love to like listen to it and experience it. And as a director, I I get to release myself of the pressure of having to execute it and tune back into like the way that the song makes me feel. And that has like given me so much more clarity in musical theater and falling like back in love with it, you know?
Was this the first musical that you've directed?
Leo's?
No.
Spring Awakening.
Because I don't consider Leo's Requiem to be a full musical.
No, it's totally not. Like there's no a 5, 6, 7, 8 to it. So it was a play with music. Spring Awakening was... No, I assisted a production of Children of Eden. I choreographed a production of Hair. So this was not the first time, but it was maybe the first time that I felt like confident as a director and choreographer and confident in my like love for the source material. And that's like a really fiery pair.
Tell me more.
I mean, I feel like that's what I'm always looking for is like love for the source material and then like the confidence to honor that source material. Yeah.
Well, what was your work as an assistant director on Spring Awakening?
This one was lovely because I was working with my mentor. We've been working together for like 7 years. And I think we finally hit a stride where...
Speaking of the long game.
Speaking of
7 years to finally hit the stride.
Well,
that's just how it works.
That's just
how it works.
No, exactly. It's a long career in it, and especially like artistic partnerships, if they're gonna be like strong and healthy, I think they take a really long time.
You have to fight. You have to find out how to disagree and move forward. It's like any serious, vulnerable relationship.
Exactly. Yeah. Because I mean,
with the added pressure of people have to like what you make. I like my wife a lot and she likes me. Nobody else's business, anything else, you know?
Right.
But like a creative partner, something else.
Yes. And luckily, like our taste, we make the same soup, we season it differently. Like we are so of the same brain. And I think I've finally risen to a level of like competency and confidence that this time in the room, we could really just trust that no matter who was leading the room, that the ship would keep going in the right direction. And that sort of freedom is something I've never felt with a creative partner before. And then we've never like actually locked into. So it was really special.
Did you talk about that with him?
Yes. Well, a little, like, because we've been working together for so long. After the last couple of processes, we started to check in about like, hey, what worked in that and what didn't work? Like this made me feel sort of silenced in the room, or like I did not feel, we could just like have more of an open dialogue about how we like to collaborate. And then coming into this one, we sort of set more of like, hey, I actually would feel better if you took more of a lead on this song, or if I took more of a lead on this song. So like clearly divvying out the work really helped us to collaborate in the moments where we hadn't made that decision yet. You know what I'm saying?
I do.
Okay.
Yeah. I think also that's fun to hear that, because you and I, like last week, had a check-in conversation like that about the project that we just did together.
And this is what I'm learning. Like it is a relationship. Any collaboration is a relationship that I think needs like clear communication, check-ins, and boundaries. And in order for it to be ever improving, we have to decide like what worked well and what didn't.
Yeah.
If we want to get better.
Something else that I wanted to ask you about that kind of relates to this track I've been on about like the musical theater and the attraction and the returning to it is I've spoken now to, I mean, on this show, 2 of you at this point, but also in my life, so fucking many people who were actors and then became directors. The actor to director pipeline.
Yeah.
What was it for you that made you want to make that change? I know you've spoken to me about the influence of this mentor,
Yeah.
But what was your journey there?
I think to start with my mentor, like I was acting for him, and then he just kept giving me more responsibilities. Like as an actor, he'd be like, "Hey, will you go like devise this with half the cast?" And then eventually he was like, "Hey, for this 1 week in a show that I'm doing, will you like come on and help me devise something?" So he just kept like pulling me. His name's Derek Van Barham. He's like a Chicago director. Shout out. He's amazing. The plug. I feel like I'm talking about him and not using his name. But anyway, he kept like pulling me to the other side of the table. So like that was a push that I needed. But then the other aspect of it was as I was acting and in these shows, I felt like I kept finding that people were like confiding in me about the process.
So you were a gossip.
I was the gossip. No, I was just like, I'm an ear, right? Like, I don't know what it is, but like people would just not complain, but like talk about the frustrations of
problem solve
and like how hard it is to put on a piece of theater and how harmful it can be if the people in power don't take it seriously or like don't handle it with care. And eventually I think I was just so frustrated that I couldn't do anything about it. Like I had all these people coming to me like talking about how harmful things were in me. Like as an actor, I felt like I had no agency. So I think it was the mix of like, I want to have a position where I can actually make change and like actually make a change in the process, in the room, in its safety, make a change artistically in the theater world and like the types of work that we're creating. It was that mixed with like learning that I just really love to lead a room and like build stuff as a whole.
Tell me more about this feeling of like community oriented or community service or service oriented. I don't know. You can choose a word for it. I don't know what the word is.
I know community feels correct. I know that I am so not into this idea that like the director is the voice of the room and like the director is the only one who like has it figured out and like shapes the vision and just like pushes all the pieces together. I'm so deeply not interested in it because why settle for one brain if you have 15 in the room? That seems absurd that like, and I don't know if people believe this or if this is just like how the role of the director has been, or that's how we're told it's been, but like to stand in front of a room and be like, my idea is better or than everyone else in the room.
Well, it's easier to sell.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I think there's the reason that it's so prevalent in cultural understanding of a director's role is because those directors are the ones that you're able to point to and say that director directs.
Right.
You know, it's like, what is directing? Well, what the guy who says he's a director does. And he says he's a director because he's invested in the I-ness of it.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
mean, you see it a ton in like film.
Yeah.
But you have like Wes Anderson or...
Yeah. Well, I mean, the auteur phenomenon comes from film, right? As an explicit theory concept. And I think there is maybe more to it there in the sense that like at the end of the day on a film, there is the final product when one person says what's in it and what's not. It's of course an intensely collaborative process.
Yeah.
And every single person involved it has their taste and their technique, and that informs every element that they touch and that everybody else touches on the show, from craft to acting to sound to editing to etc.
Yep.
But one person at the end of the day says, this is it and this isn't it.
Yes. And I think that works better in film because there's so much less time of like in-room collaboration with the full crew. But for theater, like it's mostly in the room collaboration.
And the actual thing at the end of the day, at the end of the journey, is also constant in-room collaboration. If you're not collaborating with your scene partner and the audience, what the fuck are you doing?
Then we're not doing theater.
Yeah.
And what's cool, or just to forward the point of why I don't think a director in theater should be like an auteur director, is that like I'm not even involved for the run of the show. My contract is over. Whereas like in a film, the director's not done until the movie is like cut, finalized.
And then maybe 5 years later, the director's cut.
Right.
Or in the case of Ridley Scott, every 5 years, a new director's cut.
Exactly. But in the theater, I'm a part of it for the front end, the rehearsal process, and then so much more should change when my time is up. Just because like the audiences are going to be different every night, the actors are going to be different every night,
and they're learning their roles. I mean, I often feel like I don't know what my character is up to until like maybe the second week of a show.
And I think that's great. In I shouldn't have already made you set in stone before you can get to that point.
It sounds to me like that connects to your feeling about musical theater. The control, the do it right.
Yes. Oh, that was nice. That was a good little callback, Carl.
Hey, thanks. I have a degree in journalism.
Yeah, you're incredible. Carl Bindman.
Carl Bindman, ladies and gentlemen. Hire me for all your shows, except don't, because my work permit is expiring. So don't hire me. Unless you're in Canada, then
please do.
Hey, bonjour.
But no, I think you're right. I think there's something about and I agree that like in order to do musical theater successfully, it has to be that rigid, right? It like has to be that precise, because I mean, if you're a foot out of line, you're going to get hit by the scenery flying in, or you're going to trip. Like it
or
turns
you're
into
just simply singing the wrong note.
Yeah. And that sucks.
Yeah.
Sorry, like that's not great. But in like a play or in something that's not musical theater, I love when people like do the wrong thing. You know, like I think those mistakes are the most alive parts of it. I just saw a show at the Neo-Futurists, and like the part of the show that I like kind of stuck with me is when they had this little tiny podium and they had a xylophone on here, and they had a little wooden stick to play the xylophone, and each of the characters or each of the actors would step up and like do a little speech and then hit the xylophone, and it would black out, and then the next person would appear there. But after the second person, the wooden stick fell off the podium in the blackout, and we all heard it. And we know that the stick fell, and the most exciting thing was watching the actor come up, say their monologue, and knowing that they're not going to be able to find this stick. And I'm like, oh, like that's
the show.
That's the show.
Give yourself the gift at the beginning of the fuck up.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, we saw this series of short plays from 938 Productions, I want to say, at 121A Christie Street.
Yeah, where were we?
Somewhere in the Bowery.
It's like a pretty famous space too.
Anyway, we saw this series of short plays, and the very first one, there's a moment where there's this teenage young girl and like a younger boy, and they are like blowing bubbles.
I know
and
exactly.
The guy couldn't get his little bubble blowing stick out of the bubble bottle, and he just kept playing with it and playing with it and playing with it, and it was so amazing. And I was so upset that it became clear that was an accident, because what an amazing perfect moment. If that was baked into the text, awesome.
As an actor, you do that in rehearsal, or you do that in your first preview,
and then it stays in.
I was going to say, are you repeating it every night?
Yes.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
I think that rocks.
On Winter Steel, there was a lot of stuff like that.
Yeah.
Where it's like, after the second show, I realized, I don't know what the fuck I'm doing here, or this gesture makes no sense. So I just find a new one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's brilliant.
Yeah.
And do you feel like will that ever stop for you? Will there ever be a moment where you like lock it in, or even, yeah, I'm just curious, like, let's say there's
it's a dialogue for me.
Okay.
If it's a moment on stage, just me personally, and I'm not fucking anybody else up.
Yeah.
I'll always be exploring.
Cool.
Because what's the point otherwise?
Right.
Or until the stage manager says, you need to stop. If it's another scene, I will talk with the other person. If it's a spontaneous impulse in the moment, I will follow the impulse as long as it's not something that's like harmful.
Yeah.
And based on a sort of pre-existing dialogue with people about comfort and what they're okay with. So I'm not just flying blind on stage.
Yeah.
And if it's the impulse that feels safe to do, I'll just do it.
Yep.
And then check in with them afterwards. Like in this show, in The Winter's Tale, I played the Shepard, and there's a moment where I'm like basically giving away my daughter to this guy to get married. Sorry for the archaic language, but like, I'm on the higher level of the stage because it's an outdoor theater and it's like a big stage. So I kind of run over and I'm above them and they're on the level below me. And in, I don't know, the third show, maybe I had this impulse of like, well, I'm standing over these two and their heads are there and I'm describing this person and this person. So I just plop my hand on their head and plop my hand on their head. And I'm like, and these two. And afterwards I checked in with them. And the person who was playing Florizel, super fine. They were like, yeah, absolutely. Do that. And the person who was playing Perdita didn't like it. And I was like, okay, great. I won't do that anymore with you. And I'll just put my hand on Florizel. But it's like, okay, we found a moment. Awesome. And we checked in about it. And now we know what the moment can be next time. You know, like.
And that's exciting. Like that feels like constant growth and that feels like constant collaboration that I don't think you can do in musical theater.
Wow. I will have a musical theater performer on this show.
I think you should. And I say all this, and I fully plan to keep directing musicals.
Well, please, yeah.
I love musicals. It just happens to be my antithesis right now.
It's also a really easy target because it continues to be, lucrative and successful. So, it's easy to take shots at musical theater because it's not going anywhere. Right. You know.
It's such such an established art form.
Yeah.
And especially in New York, it is really okay. Here we go.
That's the thing is what musical theater is in New York also is something that I think merits criticism in the Disneyfication of Broadway, literally in the sense that Disney owns a bunch of theaters and like most of the shows that get produced are in some capacity or another funded by or adaptations of properties that are owned by wholly or in part by the Disney Corporation. So, I think it's an expression of skepticism and resentment about like this corporate presence on Broadway, which is, its own business. But like there is a difference between global mega corporation and Broadway producer that used to exist. And now not so much exists.
All the same.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, musical theater.
And what's, I think, maybe makes musical theater, and again, I would love to have some of my friends who do musical theater come on and tell me that I'm wrong. But what we're talking about with the sort of like correctness of it being a much more specific form and therefore more reproducible, where the individual artist maybe is less important as a performer than the score, than the music, than the choreography.
Yep.
It also, as an art form, and in the traditional American musical theater of like emotional manipulation towards like easy catharsis and spectacle, like certainly lends itself to, of all of the theatrical art forms, what could be called mass production, which I think is very difficult to accomplish with something like a Shakespearean comedy.
Totally. And I wonder, I get the sense, and this might be so not true, but I get the sense that British theater makers make plays that feel a little more like musical theatery. Do you know what I'm saying?
I don't.
Like, I get the sense that like I'm finding that like the British aesthetic right now is super clean. It like transitions are clean, actor movements are clean, blocking is clean, and
excuse me.
Hey, and that's what I find in American musical theater is like this cleanliness and specificity of like bodies in space.
Yeah,
that I think the Brits do so well.
What distinguishes when I see a Broadway show generally, but a musical on Broadway, what always stands out to me as a performer is there is not a single superfluous gesture. Every single movement of these bodies on stage is very specific and highly communicative. No stray gestures at all. Like I saw Merrily, We Roll Along.
I want to see it.
It's pretty good.
Yeah.
Thanks to my mother for the birthday present a year ago. And like, no stray arms. It's so clear though, because I think in a lot of theater, like drama, because actors have that liberty, they will run with it. And sometimes it's too much.
Yes.
When I see somebody's arms moving a lot on stage, and when I feel my own arms moving a lot on stage, I'm like, that's not grounded.
Yeah.
And I think because I just don't have the facility with the art form or maybe the fluency in it, I can't read a musical theater performance the same way of like, oh, this person is not moving their arms at all. Or when they move their arms, it's at exactly the right moment. And it's like, is that a choice? Or is that a grounded choice? Or is that the movement director said this has to be here? And does it actually really matter?
Right. Because at the end of the day, we receive it the same.
Yeah.
I think that what helps that in musical theater, though, is like everything is on a metronome. You know what I'm saying? Like it's so much easier to be clear if we're all clicking to the same beat. Like even and you can start to do it in Shakespeare if you're like really in time.
But then it gets boring.
Right. But I still think there's
rhythm. There's certainly a rhythm, but I don't think a Shakespearean text operates so rigidly.
Correct.
Unless like it's like, Two Gents where it's like super constant meter. Yeah.
Yes. So I think that is why a lot of musical theater performance feels so precise.
And it's highly effective.
Yes. I think it's brilliant.
Yeah. I am in awe. And every time I see a musical on Broadway, I feel so sloppy as a performer. I am like, oh my God. Because to me, that is the signifier of this caliber of performer. There's absolute precision in movement. And I don't even know if that's a value that I want to have.
I find myself debating this so much lately, where it's like, yeah, what do I aesthetically or like in a performer or in a show, what do I want? Do I want precision? Because I think there's something amazing about like rigidity and what's the word I'm looking for? Like, not like practice, but like
containment, friction, resistance.
Oh gosh, I don't know the words, but I feel like I constantly teeter between like absolute mess, chaos, live, anything can happen, and also just like this clean, what you're saying about the gesture of like, oh, it meant something because it was so like crafted.
But I think my fear around that level of precision is because it's so persuasive. I'm not sure if I am actually enjoying that or if it's just this complete mastery that I'm seeing on stage, that it's so compelling that I'm just taking it in and accepting it, which is, Brecht's whole thing. But I do have this sort of like, as a performer, this kind of anxiety about it where it's like, I'm not precise enough after I see a show like that. But then the sort of like backlash to that feeling of like, but I'm skeptical of the whole apparatus that creates that precision.
Yeah.
I don't want to be that precise, but to operate at that level, don't I have to be?
And there's something about like the clarity of storytelling
it's so admirable.
It's so admirable. And that's all I guess we're technically doing at the end of the day is like telling stories, hopefully clearly. I guess as an actor, this is something I'm trying to figure out, like as a director, is like when to give the space for play and for the mess and the chaos and the discovery of it all, and when to be like, but it has to be here. I do need that arm to go up on this line because it means something. As an actor, what do you find you either respond to best, or what do you find you're craving in the room?
I think it kind of all depends on how it's framed. I'm certainly attracted to a director who has a strong sense of what they want the moment to mean, because I can help that happen. Right. You know, like play towards an objective is fulfilling. Play for the sake of play is helpful for establishing rapport or establishing connection within the room, but I think needs to be channeled at a certain point. So how the request for play or for precision around the moment is presented, I think, informs how I'm going to respond to it. Like a director we both know, Miguel Bregante, he is really specific of vision and kind of enters a space with that feeling. So every request he makes does carry this, like, we're moving towards this larger thing. Right. Whether it's presented as let's play around this or I actually need you to move here, because he just carries the intention of the piece so clearly in his sort of like carriage in the space, it makes it easy to do either. But if you have a director who maybe is unclear and they say, okay, just play, then I might receive that as, oh, they don't know what they want here and they want me to figure it out, which is fine. But then I would respond better to it if that was communicated that way. Of like, I don't know what I want. Let's here. Figure it out together. Find it. You know? And I think it becomes really quickly unruly if all the actors get to do all the choices all the time without the sort of direction. Not even direction as in like I'm a director directing, but direction as in we're all moving towards something with all this play. Yes. We're not just endlessly expanding, we're focusing. And it's play that can be discarded. We find a choice, we find another choice, we find another choice. And we're not finding these choices just because we're showing that we're actors and we have technique and we can have fun. No, we're finding these choices because we need to choose one. Right. Because one of them is going to tell the story in the best way or help us move towards the thing that will help us tell the story. Right. You know? So I think it's all about the framing. It's all about the presentation by the director of the ask. Totally. And I think that's like, as I'm directing more, as I'm leading rooms, like that is the most exciting and the most challenging thing in my craft right now is like building that culture in a room of like, this is how we move through the process as a collective. As we were saying earlier, like I'm huge in like community. We'll all figure it out together. But something you do is you come in with a starting point. You won't just come in and be like, and let's figure it out. You'll come in and be like, we're using these blocks and they represent these things. And we're going to figure out how they move against each other or together to make the story happen. But you're not coming in like tabula rasa. We're figuring it out. You've done work ahead of time. Okay. I'm glad you said that. I needed a little reassurance. That's like, no. It's like, it's because sometimes it's aimless, right? Like I have nothing to bounce back off of. I feel like after I direct in a process, because there's like not a ton of places that I can go to reflect unless I have like a friend who's also acting with me. Four felt crazy. That felt awful. Oh wait, there goes my train of thought. What were we saying? About checking in with your process and like... Yes, because I love to find it in the room, but I do think that I have to come in like with my book work done. Like I have to know the text. But what would you be doing if you didn't? Literally what I mean, I haven't necessarily only ever had good directors, but I don't know what a director would even be doing if they didn't show up at least with a sense of like, here's what we're working on, guys.
Right. I don't know.
The police are coming right now to arrest that director.
No, it's not me. Yeah, I don't know. Then you're just hanging out. What is that?
It's class. But even class is pedagogically oriented towards some learning objective.
Oh, it's like acting class is what you're saying. Yes. There is still a focus there.
Unless it's a bad class. Are we just what we're describing right now is the difference between a good and a bad director? Is that it?
Maybe.
So on that, actually, something I wanted to ask you about.
Yeah.
You mentioned this a little bit about what you're, as a director, as an assistant director on a musical, what you get to do is listen and help to bring out the emotionality that you enjoy in the music from the performers. Mm-hmm. And something that I think of all the people, I saw a clip of Rick Rubin in his infamous interview with Anderson Cooper, where Anderson Cooper's like, so you don't play any instruments? And he's like, no. And you don't read music? And he's like, no. And Anderson Cooper's like, but you get paid hundreds of thousands and millions of dollars to produce these records. And he's like, they're paying me, Rick Rubin, for my taste and the confidence I have in my taste. And it does seem to me that to be a director is not so different. You have to believe so much in your taste, and what you described is like wanting to have a better rehearsal process, a better room for actors. But that's also a matter of taste in process. But you have to believe so much in your taste to need to make something that way. What the fuck is wrong with you?
Now I'm sitting here and I'm like, oh my God, that's where my ego comes in.
But you do kind of need that at a certain point. To lead a group, you need to have something to lead them.
Or just like you have to believe in something.
Yeah. And I do want to talk a little bit about that because oh my God, it's so noisy today.
I know.
You know, we're independent artists. We make do with what we can. Because we were talking after seeing this short play festival about, or before, I don't know, about this feeling that I have about like the role of, oh my God.
Hey, New Jersey.
Hey, New Jersey. Could you, not?
Could you chill?
Yeah, thank you. About like expression and my kind of regular feeling of my acting process is not really expressing a lot about me. I'm not doing this as like a practice for telling the world what I care about or communicating any deeply personal ideas. I try to do it more in service of helping other people communicate those things.
Yep.
And I respond really well to directors like you who do have taste, who have a sense of what they need, and I can help them do that. So yeah, what is your relationship with that? You just mentioned ego. Tell me more. Ego non-judgmentally, to be clear.
Right.
Everybody has one, everybody needs one.
Exactly. And I spent a lot of time where I was like, I need to be like so egoless as an artist. But I actually think that doesn't help create active art. Like you said, like, so I think my relationship to like taste is I want to build rooms that I enjoy being in myself. I want to build work that I would want to sit down and watch over and over again. And I think that comes with like trusting my taste and like trusting the things that light me up. And hopefully that lights the group up too. And if it doesn't light the group up, then I shift gears and go, what's going to light you up as a performer? Like how do I activate your taste? Because now now something's happening, right? Like that's why musical theater. Why do I keep talking about musical theater? That's why some performances stress me out when I'm like, you clearly don't, you aren't behind this right now as a performer.
That's so interesting because of what I just said about my own practice being like, I often don't necessarily bring, or maybe I think I don't, but I actually do. Mm-hmm. I'm not out here expressing my beliefs and my feelings about things. I'm kind of like a vessel for the director to do their work. But maybe that's a lie. Maybe that's just like what I say to myself to trick myself to allow myself to be vulnerable in the space.
It might be
because you describing that, saying like, you know, you got to find the actors who are able to go there and do that. Yeah. And I think I work very well with you and I enjoy working with you. And I think maybe you wouldn't enjoy working with me if I was actually just an empty cup for you to pour your liquid into.
Well, exactly. That's why I love working with you. And it's what I look for in an actor is you come in with so much. You come in with ideas about the character. You come in with choices. You come in with ideas about the show. And I think that is you making your stamp and saying, this is what I believe. Because if you come in and say, I love or I hate this part of the scene for X, Y, and Z reason, that's your taste. That's what you want to put into the world. And I think you like carry that with your character, or artists carry that, actors carry that when they speak the text.
I guess what I associate being vulnerable in a room with is this sort of like clout chasing feels way too aggressive to describe this phenomenon. Mm-hmm. But like a whole other topic right now.
Yeah.
But I think the reason that the method as a concept, which is largely useless for describing actually anything because everybody means something different. But the reason that method acting, whatever that means to you, is such a figure in American acting practice and discourse is because actors are super insecure about the fact that their work is actually work. And they need to show somebody that they're actually doing work. Mm. And saying, I did all this crazy shit is a really great way of showing that you did some work.
Yes.
And a way of finding personal validation and a way of excusing yourself personally in doing this thing that's kind of silly and crazy and fun by being like, no, it's actually really hard work. Look, I did all this. And I think as an actor, a lot of energy outside of the room, I think, is spent on like justifying that, of justifying the choice to be an actor or the choice to act. Mm-hmm. And like in acting classes and acting spaces, the cost of your work is a badge of, oh, I'm doing it. I'm doing it for real. Mm-hmm. This was really hard for me because this is related to a really difficult thing I went through. Or I dug into some really serious shit here that was upsetting and hard for me to be able to go to this place in the scene.
Look at how brave I am. Look how vulnerable I am.
Yeah. And I say this kind of like, I want it to feel without judgment. Because every actor has their process and whatever works for an actor, that's fine. But it's, I think, undeniably a phenomenon among actors because it's such a precarious thing to be doing, to have anything to hold on to say, no, I'm actually working, look. Mm-hmm. And I tend not to connect with that kind of work. I tend to sort of recoil or shy away from the need to be hurt or do something hard that's clearly hard for me. Mm-hmm. And what I associate being vulnerable in a space with is that. And yes. I just don't do that. So I think maybe when I say I don't bring myself to the role per se, I'm describing the fact that I just don't engage with that kind of work.
Right.
Or that kind of value around the work.
Have you ever... Because I feel like, especially starting out as an actor or like younger actors, it's so enticing.
But I didn't start out young,
Right.
you know?
Yeah. So you were never like,
My storytelling background is journalism.
right.
It's aiming towards an objective presentation of a story for you to interpret and learn for yourself.
Yes.
My ego, absent, except for the ego of like, look at this cool story I got, or
Right.
look at how well constructed this story is. But if as a journalist, you're reading that and you're like, wow, that journalist really put themselves into it,
Yeah.
then you have failed, because the story is not about the journalist. At least the journalism that I enjoy and that I value.
Right.
And I bring that to my acting. I think just that specific value to my acting. I'm alienated by the feeling personally of I have to be emotionally, personally vulnerable in my own history and my own trauma and my own bullshit in the role for it to be a real role. I'm just like, I don't know. I don't feel that way.
Yeah. I think that's such everyone has their process, and if it works for you, I think maybe, but it
But
feels,
also, if it works for you, interrogate that.
yeah.
Why does it work for you? I just learned something in this conversation.
Well, yeah, because that style of performing feels harmful, and it also is not necessary. And it serves, I think it serves the ego as well, and you can tell in the performance. Whereas what you're doing as an actor and what I think I'm relating to as a director is this idea of like, it's for the audience to interpret. It's for the audience to understand. I don't want to show you my interpretation of the play. It'll be there. It'll inherently be there because I read it and we're all working on it. But taking a step back and being like, we're just serving the story in like the interpretations for you.
Yeah, but it's so intractable, I think, this sort of question, and we're going to be stuck with it forever, because I think it's so easy to say that also doing that work as an actor, this deeply personal in the sense of like extractive, this extractive process of I'm mining myself to bring you this thing, can also be framed as being in service of the story.
Right.
You know?
Right. I just feel like,
to be generous towards people like that.
right.
Alexandra, if you're listening to this, if we've had this conversation.
Yeah, I guess I'm not 100% opposed to it. I know people who are super fascinated by it.
It just doesn't work for me.
Yes.
Actually, that's not true, because because I'm so put off by it.
Yeah.
I just don't even go there.
Yeah. I think
What would happen if I did?
Should you try?
I mean, get me a therapist and I will.
Okay. I mean, I'd love. Yeah, that could be a cool experiment to like give it a shot. But like that doesn't light me up. Like I don't think I need that as a performer or a director, is like that level of immersion. But what I do think I'm finding is like this idea of discipline, and I'm really I've been watching the Olympic trials for swimming, and they keep talking to all of the swimmers afterwards, and they're like, "Did I talk to you about this?" And they're like, what has your journey been like to get here? Like, how are you performing at this level? And they're like,
Drugs,
all steroids. No, but they're like, I have complete discipline and I push myself harder and harder every day. Like these Olympic champions are all about like testing their own personal limits. And I think that's like the mark of a great athlete. And I think that's why people want to fall down the method, because they like put themselves they push to their extremes. I bring this up because I'm interested in figuring out what that is for me as a director. Like, what is my...
You anticipated my follow-up question.
Right? Like, what is that for me? What is my push? Because I knew as a swimmer, I also love that. I love chasing that feeling of like can I go faster? Like, can I do another lap? Like, can I do more yards at the same high speed? I loved chasing that. And then when I like fell down the artist rabbit hole, I think I sort of lost the idea of like, how do I keep pushing? And everything turned into like, if it feels good, then it's right. You know, like I'm going to go to the path of least resistance because I'm an artist and like.
But that isn't even meaningfully different than if it feels bad, then it's right.
Right. So what do you think it is? Like, what do you think it needs to be a healthy balance of both? Do you think it's whatever suits you best, whatever suits the story best? I guess I'm like trying to.
Well, I have my answer for myself, but it's useless for any other artist because I think every artist has to negotiate for themselves what their relationship with their craft is.
I think I'm interested in your answer.
I get a lot of pleasure from technical advancement. A part that stretches me and my relationship to technique, I find fun. And I think it might relate to this sort of sportsman-like instinct to always be pushing and always be advancing, because I have spent a lot of time building my abilities to perform. And I think with two purposes. What attracted me to journalism, what attracted me to being an actor, is a sort of curiosity about the world and about people. And if I don't get to push that curiosity or enable that curiosity further, then what's the point of all of the other stuff that led me to getting to do that at all? You know, so for me, what gets to indulge that feeling of I am learning, I am growing, is good. And what makes me feel like I am not learning or I am not growing is a challenge to see how I can feel that way, or find something in the part or in the performance or in the play that does make me feel that way. Or B, it's just sign that I'm not working on the right thing. Because, I think, and in the sense of what feels good and what feels bad, what feels good to me is getting to stretch, getting to grow. And what feels bad is atrophy. Which is why I'm such a fucking wreck when I'm not working on a show.
I know. I feel very similarly. Like I should have been taking a break this summer, and I'm actively taking on more projects. But that's for me and my therapist to figure out. Anyway, little tangent.
Then what's that? What is the balance maybe for you? But like, what is your guiding principle in that way?
I think I'm still finding it as a director. I think I know. I look or I get excited by work that will push me in form, or has like a big, not a problem in a play, but a big challenge. Like in Leo's Requiem, what do you do with all of these choral interludes? That is something that excites me as a director. That feels like a push to me when I read something in a play and I go, how would I possibly conceive of this on a stage? I have no clue what I want to do with the bodies. I have no clue the story that I want to tell immediately from it. I think that's an exciting push for me, is to read something that pulls me in because I have no clue where I would go with it. And I think I'm turned off by pieces where I can read it and go, I know exactly what I want to do here.
So what I'm hearing is, for both of us, that the feeling you described about swimming has not left. That it's still there.
Yeah. Because it is about like going further into something that I don't know if I can do in their there lies the possibility of failure. And I think in that, if you chase that, something new and exciting can happen.
Yeah, because if you're going to do something as insane as being a theater artist, you've already set yourself up for a hard time. Why would you try to make it easy?
Right. What we do is so absurd.
Yeah.
It's so silly that I guess like inherently we are like a form of adrenaline junkie. You know what I'm saying? Like by choosing a path that's so not clear, by choosing a path that's so unstable, it feels like.
But it's unstable for reasons that are separate from the work itself. It's unstable
Correct.
because we live in a society that doesn't value art. Despite making billions of dollars off of art
and artists.
You know. So on that uplifting note, I think we can leave it, and we'll pick this up another time. This has been a great pleasure for me, Brennan.
We did it.
Thank you for joining me. I guess if you have any final thoughts or anything you would have really wanted me to ask, this is your chance, or to plug anything you want to plug.
This is so lovely. I think that's all I have. I've had such a good time sitting here looking at these plants in your face and chatting about theater.
Well, me too. And to you, the listener, thank you for joining Art Workers, the Independent Artists Forum. I've been Carl Bindman. This has been Brennan Urbi.
You idiot.
And have a great day. Thank you again for listening. This has been Art Workers, the Independent Artists Forum. The work cited is in the show notes, as always, and if you have any questions, comments, concerns, or offers for theatrical representation, you can find me at carlbindman.com. I'd also like to thank Louie Zong for the use of his song, Fragments, as our theme song. Thanks, Louie.